This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. For more on the second anniversary of the execution of Troy Davis, we're joined here in New York by three people who were there 2 years ago, September 21st, 2011. On the grounds of the prison where Troy Davis was executed. They continue to work on the death penalty. Kimberly Davis is Troy Davis's sister and an anti-death penalty activist. Ben Jealous is the president and CEO of the NAACP. Also with us, Jen Marlowe, who co-authored the new book, I Am Troy Davis, with Troy Davis's late sister and longtime advocate, Martina Davis Correah. The book's just out this week on the second anniversary of Davis's execution. It's been released with a study and discussion guide about the death penalty developed by Equal Justice USA in partnership with Amnesty International and the NAACP. All three of our guests will be speaking at some of the events related to the book launch. But first, I want to go to Troy Davis in his own words. This was May 2009. Amnesty USA activists had a conference call about Troy Davis's case. Troy's sister, Martina Correah, patched Troy in from death row.
You know, everything we do today is going to clear the way for a better tomorrow. Everything is coming to a head, and people are starting to wake up more and more. It's really inspiring kids to get involved because that's what we really need, because they're going to be our future. And to know that they're concerned about human rights, you know, about activist work and, you know, the justice system, you know, it really gives me hope that things are going to change, because this is just the beginning of something that's about to blow up to the point where we're going to see some sort of success. We're going to win this fight. We're going to continue to open our eyes. We're going to continue to open these prison doors. We're going to continue to hold accountable all those that are in charge of these unjust systems. And together, we can realize that if we let our voice and activism work be seen and be heard, that there's nothing that we can't change a positive aspect of this world. You know, we can correct all the wrongs if we just continue to stand together, and that's what's most important. We need to continue to stand together and educate each other, and don't give up the fight.
That was less than 2 years before Troy Davis was executed. Ben Jealous, where has the movement gone from here? But let's go back to Troy Davis's case. You have Troy Davis, who is convicted of killing an off-duty police officer, Mark McPhail. He, for the decades he was in prison on death row, said he was not the killer, and he said that. Those were his dying words. What happened from there? How was it that 7 of the 9 non-police witnesses at the trial then testified? They recanted their testimony, said they had in some way or other been pressured by police to give the kind of testimony they gave. One after another death warrant was vacated against Troy Davis. This was the 4th time he was they attempted to execute him, and this time Clarence Thomas was the point person on the Supreme Court in this case, and ultimately they moved forward with the execution.
You know, the most important thing that happened was that his sister Martina stood up and the rest of the family with her. You don't get a great movement to free somebody from prison, really, unless their family stands up first. When I first met Martina in 96 or so, she said that her brother was innocent. Like a lot of people at that death penalty conference today said that their loved one on death row was innocent. And I told the same thing I told all the other family folks, is bring us the evidence and we'll fight like hell to free him. So fast forward about 13 years, I became president of the NAACP. She invites me down to meet with Troy on death row, and she has all the evidence. And she held me to my promise. That's just the way she was. But that really made the difference. And, you know, Savannah and the community with the Davis and Correah families, you know, is a relatively small community. So a big family standing up and not forgetting and not letting folks get away with this makes a difference in the community. The hard part was that the 2 people who didn't changed their testimony. One of them was the primary alternative suspect, and the other one was somebody who claimed that on a dark night, in the middle of the night, from over 100 yards away, they could recognize a dark-skinned black man standing under a tree in a shadow. You know, all of it just sort of defied reason. And then more witnesses came through. So if he was put on death row by 9 people, by the time the 7 recanted, I think there were about 6 more or so, right? There's, you know, so you had about 30. Yeah, so you had about a dozen saying this wasn't the guy. And but you know, the really remarkable thing, and you heard it in Troy's words, was that this was somebody who ultimately had an understanding of movement, right? Whose mom had been active in the civil rights movement, who really understood that there were multiple types of victory that could be accomplished here. And we've started to see some of that. We abolished the death penalty in Connecticut. The state, you know, despite the fact there had been a very high-profile homicide, we were able to maintain consensus and win. And we just abolished it below the Mason-Dixon line for the first time in Maryland. And neither one of those things would have happened.
This is the what state that has abolished the death penalty?
I think it's the 18th. It's the 18th. We ultimately, the minimum threshold for abolishing in the Supreme Court is 26. You have to prove that something is both cruel and unusual. It's like a quirk of U.S. common law. In England, it was cruel or unusual, but we're colonists. Maybe we don't know the difference between and or. We said and, it should have been or. Now we have to do both here. And so cruel is pretty easy with the death penalty. Unusual is tough. The standard for unusual is a majority of states opposed. And that's why we're so focused on getting to 26 or more.
What's the next state you're focusing on?
Well, we're focused on several. I mean, there's some possibilities potentially in New Hampshire, in Delaware, in Colorado. We came very close in the ballot in California without the support, quite frankly, without the sort of vigorous support of the Catholic Church. And you know, with the new Pope, who seems to have a more inclusive set of values perhaps than the last Pope, there is hope that next time in California we might see more vigorous support of the Catholic Church. That could have made the difference right there.
You mentioned Colorado. The governor, Hickenlooper, who is dealing with these massive 1,000-year floods right now in Colorado, actually did something unusual with the latest death row case, where he has stayed that execution, but not, not commuted the sentence. So the next governor will make the decision. So Republican after Republican candidate is now saying who will kill him first. Right.
Well, you know, what was interesting is that when Hickenlooper did that, he actually mentioned the movement against the death penalty in the country, the fact that Maryland had just abolished it. And, you know, we are getting to a place where, quite frankly, more and more people are sort of openly conflicted about the death penalty. And that's a good thing, because it used to be, you know, that Bill Clinton wanted to be president, he'd just stop and execute 3 people right in the middle of the campaign to let everybody know he was tough on crime. And now you're seeing somebody like Martin O'Malley, you know, perhaps the most ambitious, Southern Democratic governor with the greatest horizon since Bill Clinton, saying he's going to abolish the death penalty on the way to trying to become president. That's a big change.
Jen Marlowe, why did you write this book, and what does it mean that the book, I Am Troy Davis, is co-authored by Martina Davis Correah, Troy's older sister, with Troy Anthony Davis himself?
Well, my process of coming to write the book, it actually started with your show, Amy. I had not ever heard about Troy. I had not heard about Troy's case until the day after Troy survived his first execution date. So it was July 17th, 2007. I was watching Democracy Now!, and you had Martina on talking about that narrow miss. And Martina also was talking about her own struggle, the double struggle, fighting for Troy's life at the same time that she has been fighting for her own life with breast cancer. And I immediately felt that, you know, this woman was a force of nature. That was clear. And I was curious to learn more about this brother who she was fighting to prove his innocence. So I began doing some research online, quickly came upon the report that Amnesty International had put out in February 1st, 2007. They had put out the report, Where is the Justice for Me? And that was what really galvanized Troy's case in many ways, because they had assembled all of the points of the case that Ben was just talking about, the witness recantations, the police intimidation and coercion, the lack of physical evidence. They had distilled all of that into this report. And once I read that and really realized what kind of travesty of justice we were dealing with, I just wrote a note to Troy in prison, just expressing, solidarity. He wrote back. We started a friendship. He found out I was a documentary filmmaker, so he first planted the idea in my head. He said, you should make a film about Martina. So that idea was in my head, and then about a year later, I met Martina. She came out to Seattle, where I live. And we ended up having dinner at a friend of Troy's house in Seattle, Megan Thomas. And in Megan Thomas's backyard, Martina mentioned offhand, people keep telling me I should write a book, but I don't have time to do that. I need to work with someone on it. And what Troy had written in that letter just came back to my mind, suggesting that I might be a part of helping his family tell their story. And so I asked Martina if she would want me to be that person, and we started.
I wanted to go to Troy Davis's funeral. Few weeks after he was executed. I spoke to Martina Correah about her brother's life, her quest to end the death penalty, and her own struggle to save her own life.
I know my brother's happy because he's laying the rest of my mother, and they're probably looking down on us, asking us what our next move is, but I think he already knows, because this weekend has been such a powerful weekend, and see so many people come together and want to stand and fight and want to change the laws. And we're going to go to the Georgia State Capitol, and we're going to start working on that gold dome, and they're going to have to listen to us because we're their constituents, and we voted them in, and we can vote them out. And I know that's one thing that we've had to learn, that we have to make people accountable who are speaking on our behalf. And Troy made us all look within ourselves, and he made us see that there's goodness in all of us, and that all of us have to continue to fight.
Are you going to be continuing to investigate Troy's case?
I will continue until I can prove that Troy is innocent, and that the people who wronged him, I will make them accountable as well, and everyone will be brought to justice, because I'm not going to lay down and allow my brother's death to be in vain.
Do you think you will be able to abolish the death penalty in Georgia?
I think we'll be able to abolish the death penalty. I know we'll be able to abolish the death penalty, because people all over the world are asking the question, why kill when there's doubt? And I want people to know that we're no longer going to accept that, not in our names.
Finally, you've been fighting for your brother's life, and then there's your life. How are you feeling? You've been fighting breast cancer for a decade.
Well, I'm in remission, and so I'm doing good with the breast cancer. And, the fight for my life and the fight for Troy's life has been twofold. They used poison to kill my brother, and they used poison to keep me alive. And so I want people to understand that, we're not supposed to kill people, and we're supposed to help people. And I want them to know that Troy is just as much me as I am Troy. And I'll never forget that.
That was Martina Davis Correah speaking at Troy Davis's funeral on October 1st, 2011. She died 2 months later, December 1st, 2011, after her decade-long battle with breast cancer. She was 44 years old. She was awarded by the National Breast Cancer Coalition, along with, at the time, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, for their activism around cancer. It was Martina's face that graced the sides of mammogram trucks in Savannah. So she was well known, encouraging women to get mammograms. Kim Davis, I know this is hard for you. This is your older sister, and Troy was your brother. You're here today continuing the fight against the death penalty. Your thoughts 2 years later after the execution of Troy?
Well, when Troy's last execution, Troy gave each of us a charge. And he told us that he wanted us to continue to fight to end the death penalty. And even with Martina, her last days that was with us, before she had gotten, terminally ill, the last couple of months, she told me, she said that you've been in the background, but you've also been in the forefront with me. And she said, it's time for you to carry on the mantle. And she said that we are going to continue to fight to end the death penalty, and she said it's time for you to be my voice, and that's what I'm doing, continuing to be the voice of Martina, continuing to be the voice of Troy.
Now, I wanted to talk about Troy's conviction. He was convicted in '91 for the murder of the off-duty police officer Mark McPhail. The prosecution's case rested entirely on witness testimony, but 7 of the 9 non-police witnesses, as we've said, said they were coerced by police and have since recanted their testimony. 9 witnesses also implicated another man in the murder, one of the remaining witnesses who has not recanted, Sylvester Red Coles, as the shooter. U.S. District Judge William T. Moore, Jr. refused on a technicality to allow the testimony of the witnesses who claimed that after Davis had been convicted, Coles admitted to shooting McPhail. In a court order, Moore summarized, "Mr. Davis is not innocent." One of the jurors, Brenda Forrest, disagreed. She told CNN in 2009, recalling the trial of Davis, all the witnesses, they were able to ID him as the person who actually did it. Since the 7 witnesses recanted, she says, "If I knew then what I know now, Troy Davis would not be on death row. The verdict would not be guilty." Talk about the significance of this. In fact, you live in the community of Sylvester Coles. You see him.
Yes. And, funny, you mentioned about Judge William Moore, because at the evidentiary hearing that we had, me, myself personally, and my family did not think that Judge William Moore had Troy's best interest at heart, because my brother's life was on the line. And during the evidentiary hearing, I witnessed firsthand Judge Moore sitting on the stand with his eyes closed, like it was not of any importance to him. In Savannah, and state of Georgia, around the world, we can see that our justice system is actually broken. And a judge is supposed to go into something with an open mind, not already have a decision on his mind and his heart. And, we was grateful that we got an evidentiary hearing, but they actually brought my brother's evidentiary hearing back to the 11th Circuit, the same circuit that actually convicted him. There was going to be no way that he could have, gotten any success out of the 11th Circuit. You had, former police officers that came, said that they can remember the 90s, they can remember the 70s, but, I can't remember the 80s. Lead detectives, and, it was just like it was a mockery to them when they got up. They were laughing with the judge, but that was a serious time in my brother's life.
Vangelis.
Look, I think one of the things that's sort of hard for some folks to understand is that a federal judge in the Deep South is a Deep South judge who's working for the federal government. They're very much part of the local law enforcement community. I think in a lot of Yankees' minds, these are sort of like the judges who came down after the Civil War. The sort of a kind of blue, Union blue wearing representative of the federal government. But that's not what you have. What you have is somebody who's just been promoted up from the local law enforcement community. And for the local law enforcement community, making sure that you execute somebody who's a convicted cop killer is like job number 1. There was a chilling moment when we were fighting with the warden, the last warden of that death row. When we were pushing,
the previous warden, Alan Alt, right,
had stood up and said, "Don't execute Troy. There's too much doubt."
This is the warden of the death row prison, and other prison wardens around the country joined him in that letter he wrote to the governor, Nathan Deal.
That's precisely correct. And yet the last warden seemed to be on a mission. And we were fighting with him, trying to get news media in there to interview Troy. And I was talking to him about the doubts that his own guards had expressed and how cruel it was to force them to go forward. And he stopped me and he said, "Well, that's why I'm not going to let any more news media in here, because I don't want any more doubts about this." And then he just cut me off and he said, "Well, I was law enforcement in Savannah when this happened." As if that should mean that I should understand why he's willing to execute an innocent person for the killing of an officer. And so it's just important to understand that the judge is in that context. He's not really representing, if you will, sort of the highest ideals of the country. He's ultimately was representing the priorities of the local law enforcement culture.
What happened that night? A man was being pistol whipped in a parking lot, and Mark McPhail was an off-duty police officer. He went to his aid, and he was killed someone shot him, and the question was, who shot him? Now, Jen Marlowe, you actually reached out to the MacPhail family, is that right, in writing the book, I Am Troy Davis? That's true. Towards the end of the process, I thought it was very important to reach out to the MacPhail family to let them know that the book was happening and to invite their participation. The book is not trying to tell all sides of the story. It's very much Troy's story and Martina's story and the Davis family's story, but Mark MacPhail is obviously an important part of the book, and I wanted his family to have the opportunity to help me really develop him as a character so we could show his humanity and his bravery. He was killed when he was doing a heroic act, coming to the aid to rescue a man being attacked. So I talked to his mother, I explained what the project was, and I asked if she wanted to participate and give me more information about Mark, and she was not interested, and she said her family felt the same way. I wanted to turn to Martina Correa's son, to Dejan, who is now at Morehouse College in Atlanta. During Democracy Now!'s special broadcast from the prison grounds in Jackson, Georgia, I spoke with Dejan Davis Correah. He was 17 then. This is part of what he said the night of the execution.
Yes, but that hasn't stopped me from making a very, very strong connection, a unique connection with my uncle. He only would want the best for me, and that's all he ever installed in me over my years. And this even if the execution goes on today, it will not break me down. It only make me stronger. That's the thing that he installed in me, to don't let anything break you down. Just go straight on, head on, and learn from it, and be a stronger man than you once was. And I'm being strong for my family. I'm being strong for myself. And I'm still gonna go out and speak on behalf of my uncles. Still fight for injustice everywhere, and just still be the young man that I can be to the best of my ability. You visited your uncle every weekend? Well, we did when I was younger. Then we started going every other weekend. But where do you live compared to where he's imprisoned here? Just about 4 hours away. What were those trips like for you? The trip, after a while, the trips became, just second nature. It wasn't anything serious at all. The trips are very fun. I have time with my family in the car, and then we go out to see Troy, have another good time. And so it's just a very, very good 8-hour trip there and back. And, so it's nothing to be sad about when we go in there. It's something that we actually look forward to going to see him. What has your uncle taught you? Respect, most importantly, dignity, honor, and just how to recognize injustice, how to recognize fairness, and how to recognize peace all over the world. And he always told me to keep my head in my books and just to educate myself. And by him telling me that, I've educated myself to learn when someone's being treated wrong, and when someone's human and civil rights are being violated. And since I know those things, it's my right as a human being to stand up and fight against those things until those things are brought to justice. You're going to college, aren't you? Yes, ma'am. I'm going to plan on attending Georgia Tech for body engineering. I spoke to your mother a few days ago, to Martina Correah, your uncle's older sister. She's extremely proud of you, and she says you won't stop growing. Oh, no. No, I just continue to educate myself, continue to keep myself in the loop of everything that's going on, and being that's who I am today, and I won't stop until I feel that, when I know that all human rights, all injustice, everything is just the way it should be. You've actually trained as an activist. Can you talk about what kinds of things you've done during the summer and during the year? I've been mentored by Mr. Benjamin Todd Jellis, Mr. Larry Cox, various other leaders around this world, and I've just been taking bits and pieces of what they have done and just studying them, and put it into me and trying to form my own self as I grow up. And that's all I can do. And I just take those things and I run with them, and I go from there. That was Dejan Davis Correah, Troy Davis's nephew. He was 17 at the time, has now gone on to Morehouse College, where he is studying physics and engineering. Jen Marlowe. Dejan is a phenomenal young man who is going to make enormous contributions in his life, who's already made enormous contributions. He's an activist in his own right. We are trying to continue to raise money so that he can study at Morehouse, and so for folks who might be interested in helping support Dejan's education and his cousin Kirsten's, they can write an email at troyanthonydavis@yahoo.com, and we'll send back all the information about how they can help. We're going to break and then come back to this discussion. We're talking to Kim Davis, sister of Troy Davis. Jen Marlowe
Mello, author of the book I Am Troy Davis, which is out this week. Tonight, they will be holding an event here in New York at St. Mary's Church, where Martina also held an event when Troy Davis was alive, speaking to him on the phone and putting that phone call on a microphone. We're also joined by Ben Jealous and want to find out from him what are his plans as he prepares to leave the NAACP and the projects that the NAACP is now working on. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.